Hey guys, what's up? Matt here from Coffees for Closers, and we got Mr. Vince DelMonte on today. We're going to be talking about sort of how to build a better business, not a bigger business. Everyone's talking about nailing it and scaling it and all that kind of good stuff. But I think the question that a lot of people don't ask is why. So we got Vince on here to sort of get some life lessons. So if you like that kind of stuff, make sure you watch.
Ex-Special Forces sniper turned entrepreneur. I've scaled numerous businesses to 8 figures. My name is Matt Ryder. This is my podcast, and I'm telling you to put that coffee down.
But how you going, Vince?
I'm doing good, Matt. I'm excited to have this conversation. I think it's resonating with a lot of people in our community. And as you said, why is it resonating for a lot of people? And I grew up in the whole scaling and nailing, but the whole, empire building and, man up and get to the next level. And I think there's a lot of value for that. But I think a lot of that already comes factory installed for guys like us who are entrepreneurs or accomplishers, performers. And I've been going through a very powerful, a very self-reflective last couple months, trying to understand why enough is never enough and why I've put all my currency in growth. And there is a healthy version to wanting to grow. There's a healthy version of being a performer. A lot of people benefit from that. But there's also a very dark side, a very unhealthy side. And I don't think it's from a malicious, not from a conscious place, but it does come from a subconscious place from traumas in the past. And I've been trying to figure out, why do I have such a hard time connecting with people, being present with people? Why do I feel having just a conversation and sitting around is unproductive and boring? And, big revelation for me is that I found my identity, I think as most entrepreneurs do, in what I do and not who I am. And what I do in terms of how many attendees we have coming up at this next event, how much we made this year. And just, it's all about what's happening, call them what questions as opposed to who questions in terms of, who are you becoming? Are you happy with, wow, you hit that milestone, but are you happy with who you've become to get there? And I've gone through some really, really, really dark storms. I'm still in a really, really dark storm right now that I don't know how it's going to end up. And as you start to question, like, why was it worth it? And I can tell you right now, it's not worth it. It's 100% not worth it. And sometimes you have to hit rock bottom. Sometimes you have to lose things that you didn't think you could lose to actually wake up. And I think this will be my new chapter, and sharing with men and women that, before we start out on this journey, like whether you want to have 100K or 100K a month or 100K a day business, whatever your goals are, you have to ask why. And for me, a lot of it comes from feeling unworthy and not like what I have currently is sufficient to bring value to the community, which leads to constant comparison syndrome to see what other people are doing to figure out what I could do more of so that I can try and meet this feeling of not being worthy, not being good enough. And for me, it all comes from my long distance running days.
Okay.
And,
talk to me about what do you mean by that?
So, through therapy, when you start to experience, behaviors in your life, and you start to wonder why is this affecting me so much? So last year, our company hit a revenue record month. It was the number I always wanted to hit, and I couldn't believe we actually did it. I was like, wow, like we made it. Shortly after that, we made more money in one weekend than we made in almost an entire year, like a few years prior, at an event. And it brought in so many new customers, big high ticket program was launched. And then slowly after that, we bit off more than we could chew. Operations weren't in place and things slowly started to unravel. And I was not in an emotionally stable place. to handle, we got some big refunds. Never experienced refund requests like that before from great members in our community. And I was experiencing loss, disappointment, and rejection. Now, I wasn't using those words at the time, but they triggered me to a point where I started using frustration as fuel. I started using negativity as fuel to drive the team, as opposed to connecting the team. I disconnected the team, and then that created more problems. To a point where I became very emotionally unstable, and I wasn't able to regulate my emotions. And I started to really treat my family poorly because I was so mad. I was frustrated, and I treated my wife poorly, my kids poorly, and became a guy that I didn't even recognize. So
it's easy to do, though. I think it really is, and I think it's important. It's hard when you run your own business, and people who listen to this podcast are business owners and sales reps. When you run your own business, a lot of your self-worth is tied up in the performance of the business. I saw this a lot in special operations. I, for whatever reason, never fell into it in special operations where your self-worth is from your job, right? I was in snipers and people are like, I'm a special forces sniper, I'm killing it. I never really understood that. But in business, I did, because as soon as I became a successful business owner, I was like, oh, this is, kind of my identity. And I think there was definitely a period where and I probably only came out of it maybe 6 months ago, I think, where I became sort of assured enough in myself to where I didn't really care. I sort of posted a lot less on social media. I would go on holidays and do things and wouldn't post anything about it because I didn't need the validation, as it were. But, it really does. There was a time a while ago where we went through a really difficult time in one of our businesses, and I had to sort of steer the ship, and I was quite worried that we were going to shut down one of the major divisions. Super emotional, very much conflicted between what should I be doing? Do I even need this? And then from there, that stress level escalated to where I was not good at home at all. And that was a huge wake up call for me, because my wife was like, "Oi, motherfucker, you better snap out of this. You better sort your shit out." And then that was good. She called me on it, and I was able to check myself a little bit and calibrate, and then, kind of detach myself. But it really is so easy to get into, you see Instagram, and, you sort of can understand how little girls want to look like models and little boys want to look like superheroes, because you're just sort of fed these dopamine bullshit hits of people's ideal life. And, especially, you see these people making money, but no one ever talks about net.
Yeah. Or what it's costing them health-wise, relationally wise, emotionally wise. And you wonder, would you take all that in exchange? And that's the thing,
Also, the context of their life. Me and you both have a wife and kids, right? We have obligations. I'm not a 30-year-old single man who lives by myself. And if I was, I would do nothing but work. I know that. And I'm sort of glad that I have people going hey, let's go do something. Otherwise, I would literally just work all day, every day. So your ability to drive a business when you have absolutely no responsibilities really whatsoever, and you have no time constraints, you don't have kids, waking you up 3 times a night and stuff like that, are just very different. So I think people's conception of what's possible don't take into account the compounding factors. And then you're all of a sudden putting yourself up against people with an extraordinarily hot offer that just happens to hit really hard in the marketplace, which is almost serendipitous in some respects. And then they're, 28 years old and single, doing nothing but working 19 hours a day. It's it's different.
Yeah. And you can't compare yourself to that. I mean, when you're single, put the pedal down, but at the same time, start to figure out that number, something I never figured out. And here's, first tip, what do you need versus what do you want? Because those are 2 completely different numbers. Mm-hmm. And, I think probably everybody listening to this podcast has everything they need, if not way, way more.
Most do, yeah.
Most people have. So what you're stressing about is what you want. And the question is why do you want that? Because that's out in the horizon. And so you live in this gap instead of this gain mindset that look how far we've come, and you don't live in the state of gratitude and humbleness So you get caught up in, hey, we should be here. And what happens is you start to disconnect from your own journey. And when you're not plugged into your own journey, you're not grateful for the experiences and the lessons that you're having and the timing that you're receiving them at, which is unique to your story. So I think that we get caught up in just trying to, be where we're not actually meant to be. And then that takes away from the joy in the process and being able to just be at peace with where you're at right now. Because if you think you should be further along, then you're going to try and take more control. And if you think that you gain peace from having control, you're sadly mistaken. I think I've found that the most peace comes when you realize that you're not completely in control and that things can happen outside of your control, and you have to be okay because there might be lessons that need to be taught to you. And I believe in God and a higher power that is navigating a better version of you. And if you don't have that awareness, then every time you hit a roadblock or something negative happens, you're going to spiral. So I think I've learned that peace comes from not having control and not needing control. And that doesn't mean you don't have goals, doesn't mean you don't have a team, doesn't mean you don't work your butt off when it's time to work, but it also doesn't mean that you go crazy or freak out when you have a bad day or a bad week or a bad month. And it doesn't mean like you have a bad life or that you're a bad person. I think that's what happens where our identity becomes what we do. And that's a very dangerous place.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember watching people lose themselves when they left the military. And I think I see very similar parallels because, people in the SF community are highly driven, motivated individuals in the same way that business owners are highly driven, motivated individuals. And if you tie your self-worth to a thing that you do, you can't do that thing forever.
Right.
Like no matter what it is, you can't do it. I can't run a business forever. Like I just can't, like especially not the capacity I do now. And I think like, the more you can kind of realize some of these things and I think you hit it on the head, what it is you need versus what it is you want, I think is a very important exercise for people to go through because it's like, and by all means, head down, ass up, until you get what you need. And then once you're there, like take a look around. Someone told me once, it was like, it was like this a couple of years ago. And it was like a mentor of mine. He goes, you live life like someone trying to get to the top of Everest. And I took that as a good thing. And he's like, no, but you look down the whole time. And he was like, the view's good along the way. You should just take a moment every now and look around about how far you've actually come. I was like, oh, that's a good piece of advice.
Gratitude is the ultimate mental lubricant. When you're in a state of thankfulness, you can't be in a state of anxiousness. Those two things can conflict. So if you're always anxious, how do you solve that? If you're always worrying, how do you solve that? You become thankful and you start to look at what you get to do and the impact you're having. And that is how you shield yourself, guard yourself from those feelings of like performing from a place of I need to versus like I get to. And that's been really, and just knowing that like, hey, this isn't a race, right? This is, and I think a lot of performers, like we're competing, but like against who? And because as you said, you don't have the context to what they're sacrificing. And what does it matter, what anybody else is doing? So I think like you're building something that is best for your best life and for what matters to your values and to your family. I think it's so easily missed. I think what I see is like a lot of people, then you take your loved ones for granted, right? And you take your kids for granted. Oh, my kids will always be there. Oh, my wife will always be there. My health will always be there. Or I can always get to that later. I can get to that later. And you get so entrapped that it's very hard to come out of unless you do hit rock bottom. And the time I've kind of seen most people kind of say, wow, what's going on here? Is when they start to lose stuff that they didn't think that was possible to lose. And then all of a sudden you realize you've been building your entire life on, a bed of sand, on unstable foundation. And you're carrying all this pressure on, a good analogy is like tight ropes. You're trying to carry all this pressure, this reputation you built, this identity you've built, all the success you've, found your success in. And it's a lot of pressure for one person to carry. And most guys aren't sharing this openly. So they continue, right? They continue to project a certain life that they've accomplished, but it sets you up for a major fall. And I think a lot of it comes from, there's maybe it's arrogance, but arrogance, I heard a great definition, comes from fear, doubt, and insecurity. Like the guys who are the loudest, the guys who are projecting, look at us, look at us, look at us. And why do you have to tell everybody? Why you got to tell everybody? If that's actually what I'm trying to walk in, and what I've learned is like to walk in humbleness. And the humbleness is knowing exactly who you are and what you're bringing to the table, and not projecting anything more. Not projecting anything more, not projecting anything less. Like I know who I am. I know who I am.
So how is this changing you as a mentor? So you mentor fit pros, you mentor people who want to come in. They're young, usually young guys, motivated,
First, figure out your desired end state. It's like, it is that why question. It is tough when, a young guy doesn't have any responsibilities and, what's he doing? He's not talking to his mom and dad as much, but guess what? That has consequences too. I think you can definitely get away with going harder when you just have less commitments to people in your life. But the way it's changing me as a coach is I'm able to connect with people and let them just embrace their own journey and reassure them that you're going to get there. You want to get there. Like, first of all, let's figure out why. And it helps them normalize a lot of the highs and lows of entrepreneurship, like the bad months, the bad days where they want to quit. And it just helps them realize like they're probably way closer to their goal than they thought. Having somebody who's way further along tell them that, like, hey, I've got multiple homes. I've done all this. It's not worth it. I have friends who've achieved what you think you want to achieve. And I have private conversations with them and they're saying it wasn't worth it because of what I've lost. The sacrifice wasn't worth it. And they're not happy. They're actually sad and they just don't know how to, they're now picking up the pieces. And when they hear that, I don't know if they're really hearing it. The warning signs are definitely going out. But to reassure people, like, your identity is not how much you make. Your identity should be like your community, right? You look at companies, I forget the one that they sell the shoes, but like their companies, their brand, their values, like they give a set of shoes to every person that buys a pair of shoes. And like their identity isn't like Lambos, and their identity isn't like, look how many trips I go on, look how big our company is. It's look at the impact we're having, look at the community we're building, look at the results of our students. So what I'm teaching our students is to build a thriving community, right? Like how can you build, like, let's get 100 world-class transformations. How do you build a reputation around everybody knows you because your clients get amazing results? They just keep producing incredible results. And why not get really, really good with a few people and really develop people and just have that give and F factor. So I think have the give and F factor, build a thriving community, embrace your story, and just really play the long game. And like, what are you doing in order to be able to do this in 10, 15 years from now so that this becomes sustainable? What does what are the frameworks and systems look like in order to be able to go the distance? I've been doing this for 17 years now. So having boundaries, ending your day at a specific time, having trips, making sure that you're building the business for your family and not for you. I think here's a good way to put it. Are you building the business with your family, or are you building it like for your family? A lot of us guys, I was the guy saying, I'm building it for my family, I'm doing it for my family. The truth of the matter is I was building it for me. Not like maliciously, but like I wanted to grow. But the question is, are you building your business?
Once you hit a certain level of income, it makes borderline no difference.
And I think when you build your business with your family, your spouse, your kids, like the things that mean the most to you, they're involved in the decisions. hey, Vince or Daddy, we want to go away, or 2 weeks every summer and we don't want you to work. Say the kid said that. Great. So we don't run promotions. We don't do anything in July. Hey, I'd love to be able to do this every year. Okay, great. I guess December, we're not running promotions either, because that's when we all go away as a family. So build the business with your family, not for them. And think, if you're leaving your family the leftovers, if you're leaving them the leftovers and you're scaling, you're not winning. I think, my dad always warned me of that. Says the biggest failure is having worldly success without home success. It's just, you missed it. So I think just starting to have those real, and I want everybody to hear what I'm saying. Like, I'm not judging. I'm speaking from personal experience, and I'm speaking from a place of warning. And I think if people can just start getting self-reflective and just start to ask themselves, how do I manage this drive? Your drive is amazing. It's a gift. But like, if it's out of control, where all you know how to do is hit the gas pedal, and you don't know how to use the brakes or the steering wheel, you're going to crash.
Yeah, and I think it's, have you ever had a mentor that kind of sat you down and told you any of this stuff, or you know what I mean? So it sort of broke it down for you. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made was a really aggressive reinvestment back in my business. That was one of the largest mistakes that I made. I brought on a mentor about 2 years ago now. He was the CEO of Smirnoff. Name is Kim, phenomenal human being, great guy. He's actually my neighbor randomly. Met him, started talking to him on the balcony. Turns out he was a CEO of Al Demek, CEO of Smirnoff, like really successful. I mean, he's a monster of a house, right? My house was like a tiny little thing compared to this, right? So Sydney's quite cramped and small. It's very urban, right? And I brought him on as a sort of mentor for me and Marco and the business. And I brought him on to really teach us how to scale the business. This is what I was like. So, man, you've run all these huge businesses. And he's taught us how to be more corporate and put in systems and structures and work in progress reports, and which has tremendously freed up my time. Tremendously made me and Marco more efficient and put a more corporate structure in. It's a much more expensive business to run than what like a traditional coaching business is. However, we have a lot more time. But what he was actually doing was stopping us from, like, the mandate that he said is, my job here is to actually make you wealthy so that you can do the things in business that you want because you want to, not because you have to, and not because you feel like it. So it's like his job was to help us set up a business that made us wealthy. And what that, it's not done yet or anything like that, but what he was constantly looking out for, and he's in his 60s and he made all the mistakes, right? Like, he spent, his whole 30s and 40s working, being away from his family all the time, flying around the world. They had three private jets for himself, right? Like, being the CEO of Smirnoff's a serious job, right? Yeah. And so he was away all the time, working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day type thing, made all the mistakes. And I think one thing that he did really well, this is why we've changed so much over the last couple of years, is because he was like, guys, like, the business is there to make you money. It's your business. It makes you money. And then you pull that money out, you put it personal, you invest it wisely, you grow it until you have a nest egg where you never have to work again. And he goes, and then you're in a position to where you're done. And anything you choose to do from there is voluntary. And if one of your businesses goes down, you go, oh, fuck it. See you later. Bye. Right. And that's been a really interesting experience for me, especially having the interaction with someone who's like not my dad, you know what I mean? Because I didn't, sort of talk us through that. I've calmed down a lot over the last couple of years because of a lot of his influence. And I think a lot of the things that, he's kind of taught us and put some of the systems and structures in. So I'm very serendipitous, very lucky just having him my neighbor. He's on the board of our company and all that kind of stuff. So really, really interesting guy. But I think it sort of reigns true. A lot of the stuff that you said is like, especially because the businesses that he run were in the billions, so it's not like we're going to, be able to flout our success and, and sort of big note ourselves when he was, his smallest division was doing 150 times what our best year ever will be, So really interesting transformation over the last couple of years with some of that stuff. And I think that I'm very lucky to be able to say that we're sort of front of mind and like with that shit. But yeah, man, like I think it's super interesting. And I think, I see a bit of a shift in the industry right now. I think when I first came into coaching and consulting, 10K a month was the number. And then it magically became 30K a month. And then it became 100K a month. And the number became $1 million a month. And now I'm hearing everyone say 2.5 a month. Not that many people are hitting those, but everyone's like always seems to be reaching for like the next milestone. And it seems to me like there's some sort of like leader or pseudo leader of an industry that sort of says their numbers all the time. And then from there, everyone tries to kind of replicate. But I think like when Sam Ovens was like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
And he scaled his business down from, I think, $3 or $4 million a month to 300K and said he's capping it at 300K. And then he eventually he signed up a shitload of people, decided to scale it back up, signed up a shitload of people because he's Sam Ovens, and then refunded everyone and set him out.
What's he doing? So he's running his business at 300K per month?
No, he got rid of it. He has School, School, the online platform.
Yeah.
So he's just doing that, but he had consulting.com. He sold that to Rian Doris, I believe, who's the CEO of Zero to Dangerous, Flow Research Collective.
See, it's like Taylor Welch is on the same, drumbeat now too, preaching, less, not more, community. How do you hit your goals with just 100 clients? Why do you need 1,000 clients? Why not have 100 great clients? So it's a great shift. It is a great message. I believe again, I don't know if it's right or wrong. Again, it's how you do it. Again, it's like, there's nothing wrong with being 250 pounds and ripped, but like, how are you getting there? Are you 5'5" or are you taking, it's like, it's how you're getting there. I think that's the self-reflective question you've got to constantly ask yourself. Do you like who you're becoming and how you're doing it? Because that's going to dictate your character and how you look back and whether you can say that was worth it. I would actually say, I hope my son does it this way too. Like, no, I don't want my son to do what I did. Like, so I think you can start asking some very, very raw and real questions. And then just, hey, good for them. Like, hey, if they're growing and that guy's got everything intact with his personal life, good for him. Like, that's good. There's maybe what is possible, but it doesn't matter. I'm just like in a place now where I want to set this business up and I want it to be an inspiration to people in terms of, you don't have to sacrifice your values. And I don't think anybody does it consciously. I think it does come from us not ever understanding who we are. And that's the process I'm in right now in therapy. I have a therapist and I ask her questions like, am I selfish? And she says, no, you're not, you're not selfish. You don't have your priorities in alignment. It doesn't mean you're a selfish person. I'm like, how come I don't know how to connect with people? And well, let's go back to when you first started experiencing all this trauma and disappointment. It goes back to my running days when I was supposed to perform at a certain level and I didn't. And I had this massive blowout in a race. And at the end of the race, I was in my parents' car and I smashed the windows and I had the first experience of rejection, disappointment, and loss. And, my therapist said, have you ever talked to that 15-year-old boy before? And I said, and she said, as soon as she said that, I started to get emotional and I started to cry. And I said, what's happening? She goes, would you like to speak to him right now? There's a 43-year-old man. And I said, and then all of a sudden I just completely broke down. And I've told this story many times and I normally cry when I tell it, but I said, I've never talked to him before. And she said, talk to him now. And I started just talking to him and I said, it's okay, buddy. We'll get him next time. You did your best. You ran your heart out. And for about 45 minutes straight, I just literally bawled my eyes out. And I said, what is happening? What is happening? I'm not I'm not faking this. She says, you're grieving. And I said, what am I grieving? She said, you're grieving loss. you've never stopped to grieve the loss you've experienced in your race. Your life has just turned into a nonstop run where you just keep falling. And all the stuff you keep doing is just another race, another race. And I've answered that date why I have a hard time connecting with people. It's because I never learned how to connect with myself. And I never learned how to love myself. And I never learned how to be patient on myself. And I never learned how to extend understanding to myself, which is why I've had a hard time doing that with others. And that therapeutic process of understanding why I am the way I am has helped me now start to, I journal every single day. I reflect every single day. I record my top 3 wins from the day. I'm always in a state of gratitude. I have a lot of time I spend just talking with my brothers and my parents. And me and my middle brother, we were really distant through COVID and all the politics and stuff. We didn't see eye to eye, and we've reconnected. He's my best friend. We built a business together in the last year. Everyone in my life is completely different. And I'm not bragging or anything. Like, I just question, I always wonder, like, who am I? Like, am I just a guy who works hard and a rich guy? My brother-in-law is like, oh, Vince is just a rich guy. I'm like, no, that's not who I am. I've had success, and I've just reshifted my priorities to being. And sometimes for an entrepreneur, that is really boring. And just being with my kids and sitting on the ground and playing with my kids, like, it's really boring sometimes. I want to do it. It's boring. It's like sitting there on the floor doing, like, playing different funny games. And I'm like, no, that I don't need to judge how I spend my time, because my identity is not what I'm doing. It's being and giving my presence, and my presence is my gift. And the other day on a team meeting, I said, hey, I don't know you guys. And, I found out, my team, 4 out of 5 people in the room on a Zoom call were divorced. I didn't even know that. I'm like, tell me your story. And instead of doing our 90-minute L10 tactical marketing meeting, we spent 45 minutes just talking and getting to know each other. I'm like, I would have never done that. Years ago, that would have never happened. It would have been, okay, guys, what's the content calendar? Let's take a look at all this stuff. Like, it was issues, discuss, solve. Now I want to, like, tell me your story. I want to understand, like, where you come from. And holy crap, we had so much in common. And I'm like, okay, now I know who you guys are. We're now connected. And I never saw value in connection. I saw value in currency, but not connection. And it's a better way to live. Relationship. I want to live, I just want to live differently. And if that means not hitting certain metrics, I'm okay with that, because that's not my identity anymore. Because I understand.
There's more than one success metric, right?
Right, exactly. I saw a competitor of ours, they got a big event coming up. I think they got 800 attendees. And that was the number we wanted to do next year. And we want to do like 400 or 500. I don't have my visa at the time that we were going to, we would have had to start to promote. And we said, I'm going to have a smaller event. Our event's probably, 9 times smaller from a number standpoint. And last year, that would have triggered me. That would have messed me up. I would have said, guys, what's going on? We need more. Like, what's going on? We got to do more. We got to do more. We got to do more. I'm like, good for him, man. That's fantastic. I can't wait for our event. And our event is going to have 80 to 100 people, and they're going to have a connected, intimate, interactive experience. It's going to be different. Yeah. And I just not.
By the way, next time you do those, I expect a message saying, "Do you want to come talk?" I'll happily fly to Mexico and talk.
Okay, amazing.
Nobody invites me because I'm in Australia.
Yeah.
Nobody invites me anything.
You're welcome.
I need friends. I got friends too. I got things to say.
Yeah.
I also think that, like, just hearing you say that, I think being in the sales and marketing world reduces the humanity of people, because you look at people in market segments, and you think about target markets and demographics and pain points and avatars, and you know what I mean? You don't actually think about people. And so you see names and thousands of names and people coming through in sales calls, and you just sort of, it's all numbers, and it really dehumanizes people a lot. And it's very interesting.
It's really good insight.
I think like, all this stuff is so new. It's like being famous, right? Like no one's figured out how to be famous because being famous is such a new thing that evolutionary speaking, it's so insane. Like for someone to be really famous, like The Rock or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how you don't lose yourself, because we're not equipped for that in the same way that we're not equipped to have a fridge full of food. But having this sort of like dopamine hit rush, crazy world, where, you're making money in marketing and online and you're working from home and you're speaking with people on Zoom and all different, it's just weird, and I think everyone needs to give themselves a break.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I don't think we figured out how to do this.
We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Actually, that's my training I'm doing today at 9 a.m. Eastern here. But how not to beat yourself up, because because guys come in and people torture themselves with these expectations that are so big in the short term. Like, why don't we make these expectations in the short term a lot smaller, and let's set some bigger expectations for like way down the road, and that way you can enjoy this. People just really destroy themselves just with like, I should be here. Like you said, it's who?
Yes,
you're like, what does that even mean? Like, based on what? No, this is exactly where you're supposed to be. Everyone receives their lessons when they receive their lessons. So that's been a hard one for me to learn, because I've been doing this for 16 years. So you see guys come up and they pass you, if you will. They catch up and then they soar way beyond you, and you started at the same time and you have access to the same resources. And I just learned that, you got to really be gracious on yourself, and you got to love yourself in this process and just say, hey, I'm just really grateful that I even have awareness that this is an issue and that we're working on it right now. And, I've seen people just, I can't take it anymore. I was like, yeah, of course you can't take it anymore, because you're putting so much pressure on yourself. And it's not good pressure. There's two types of pressure. Some pressure can heal you, like if you get a nice massage, but there's other pressure that comes from a ninja that could kill you. You're putting the wrong pressure on yourself. Like, so put some good pressure on yourself that, hey, if we keep moving in this direction, your family's going to be taken care of, forever. My no, I just wrap up with this story here. Just passed away, 96 years old. And I came over from Italy, literally on a boat. He had to actually sneak onto the boat because he didn't qualify for the medical exam they did back then. It would have been the equivalent of people getting fake vaccine passports to like travel right now. That's what he did way back in like,
runs in the family, eh?
Yeah, runs in the family. Yeah, and he came over not knowing the language and started a new life in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and he built a lot of property, including Club Italia, which is a famous landmark, and Fairview Mausoleum, which is a famous upground cemetery. And long story short, to say all that, just a few days ago, my nonna, who's still living, just gifted me and all of my brothers and all the cousins a substantial amount of money. And it was money from my nonno's hard work for over 90 years. So what am I talking about? Since he was 26 years old when he came to the country. And, I know he had a vision of always wanting to provide. He was your classic provider. He didn't provide in love. That was maybe a deficiency in the family. Now I'm hearing these stories, but he provided financially and he gave his family. They never worried about anything. And now here, me, his grandson, the oldest grandson, and my brothers and all my nieces and nephews and my cousins, we're all beneficiaries of that vision he had of coming to Canada for a better life. That's why he left Italy, because there was no opportunity in Italy. He came here for a better life, and I'm a beneficiary of that. And I think if you can get your mind wrapped around, hey, I'm doing this for my kids, my kids' kids, not to, the fame, fortune and all that. Like, that's the stuff that destroys men, power and pleasure. Those are the four things. Like, that's another podcast. But I think just getting real clear on, hey, I'm going to take care of my family, and it's probably going to require to impact a lot of people along the way, and just enjoy the lessons that you gain at the time that they come, and be grateful that other people are gaining their lessons when they need to receive them. And that's it. Just don't let other people those blessings block you from receiving your own blessings.
Perfect, man. Well, I appreciate your forthrightness and honesty. And as someone who's worked with you in a pretty deal, I mean, we've known each other for a while now.
Yeah.
Had lots of conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always learn a lot from you, Matt.
Yeah, and vice versa, man. You're a good dude, and you know what you're talking about. And if you're a PT and you're looking to, grow your business to an appropriate level that's going to provide you with happiness and security, then Vince is your guy. Tons of fitness guys listen to this because I used to be a fitness sales dude. So, all right, man. Perfect. Well, I really appreciate it. If you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, go hit up Vince on Instagram. Where can they find you, Vince? Just Vince DelMonte on Instagram?
At Vince DelMonte. That's the podcast. That's the Instagram. That's the YouTube. That's the Facebook at Vince DelMonte.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thanks very much. See you in the next one. Bye.
Put that coffee down.